It is 9:01, and so we're going to move forward with our program on today. We have been offering this series for the last 6 months, and we've been doing it in partnership with two outstanding organizations, with the Scattergood Foundation and with Spectrum Health Services. We could not have offered this series without their professional guidance and suggestions. And so on today, we thank both of those organizations, and particularly with Allison Ferguson, with Joe Pyle, and Samantha Maitland. On this morning, Dr. Samantha Maitland is going to introduce our guest speaker. Samantha is the Vice President of Learning and Community Impact at Scattergood. She's also Senior Evaluation Consultant with Yale Eval. She leads the RISE Partnership at Scattergood. And the RISE Partnership, for those who are with and lead nonprofit organizations, it is specifically designed to help you strengthen your impact. She's former Senior Advisor to the Commissioner at the City of Philadelphia Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. So on this morning, we are very, very happy to have Samantha back with us, and she is going to introduce our presenter for today. So with that, Samantha.
Thanks so much, Marla, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Good morning. So, we planned this day over 8 months ago, and I was so hopeful that things would look different. And although there is real stress and strain and work to be done, it does feel like we're heading in the right direction. I know for me, sending my child back to school in Philly last week was just brought joy to me. And I cannot think of a better person to speak to finding joy during these times. And I'm so grateful Dr. Robin Smith can join us today. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Robin for more than 7 years, starting in my role at the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. And I can honestly say that just seeing Dr. Robin's face right now brings joy to me, even while recognizing difficult moments. So as you know, Dr. Robin is incredibly successful, a licensed psychologist, ordained minister, who's worked with incredibly successful large companies, sports and entertainment professionals, provided executive coaching and even more. She's an experienced media and television personality, the author of several books, and maybe my favorite title, Therapist in Residence on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Seeing what she does makes me proud to call myself a psychologist, and I just cannot wait to hear what she has in store for us. So with that, Dr. Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So much, Samantha. Good morning, and good morning to you in a special way. When you called and asked if I could do this, I said, of course. If it's coming from you and I can do it, my answer is yes. I have such great respect for you, for your heart and your intellect, the way in which you have merged your passion with purpose. So it's my honor to be with you, and of course the Scattergood Foundation, who I have done a few things with. I Will Listen, and some other work, and of course with PIDC as well, and for Marla's warm introduction and of you, as well as her working with my team. So I think it's a humbling moment for us to gather, and I'd like for everyone to, and I'm going to just go into my screen, make sure that all the technology is doing what it should do, so that we can move into the presentation, and then I'll start talking. And my team is here just to make sure that everything gets clicked on properly. Yeah, I'll let you click. Yeah, it seems like it should. There we go, I think. No. Yep. Okay, it should be.
You did click share screen.
Yeah, I did. I click share screen. Let's just make sure. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Yeah, let me just go back to the beginning. Okay. Is it not doing it? Well, we'll see. So I'm going to see whether or not this is what technology does. But what's important, and I want to make sure you can see the screen and share it with me and be a part of this, because yeah, is it here? It's coming. You can see it. Okay, very good.
You're good.
Okay, I'm good. Good. Although what's happening is it's not moving for me. I'm not sure why. I'm going to unshare for just a moment. I'm not sure what's happening. And just see. Yep, 1 second. Yeah. Yeah, so you can see that, but it's not moving. Okay, Samantha, is there a way, just because I don't want to take our time and I want this to move, I'm not sure why it's not. I know they said in there were no glitches in the testing it out.
Right.
Dr. Robin, this is Quinn here. Can you tell me what you're using to advance your slide? Are you using your mouse or the arrows on your keyboard?
I have both, but I'm using the arrows right now. I was using the mouse, but yeah, I'm using the arrows.
If you press escape on your keyboard.
Yep, which I did.
And your screen didn't change when you did that?
No.
Okay. All right, let me pull up the PowerPoint file that was sent to me last night, and I can share that as you
okay, that's what I was just going to say. We'll and I think this is all part of this moment. I mean, Dr. Maitland knows that I believe in real time learning. I think that we miss out on not only moments of joy, but moments to transform what isn't working. Now, this is not such a big deal, although there are people who do what I do, who would, have a meltdown, and there's nothing wrong with a meltdown. But part of what I want to really talk with you about and invite you to consider today is how your mind makes meaning with what happens and what shows up in your day, so that if you were doing a presentation and the slides didn't go exactly the way you wanted them to go, would it crush you? And would it crush your day? Would it steal your joy? How many of us have awakened in the morning, maybe prior to COVID and last year, and had our favorite song on the radio, or heard something that inspired us in such a big and major way? And then you got in the car, or you got on SEPTA. And just for those of you who don't know, I'm a native of Philadelphia. I was born here. I was educated here. My father was a native of Philadelphia, a physician, a psychiatrist, a civil rights leader. There's so much I could tell you about my history with the city and with the city of Philadelphia, my history that my father, what he created here in the city was amazing, a gentle giant. My mother from Pittsburgh, and they met in Japan. But one of the things I want to remind you is, so if you get in your car in the morning, or you're getting on SEPTA, and now it's getting on SEPTA with a mask, and trying to hope that everybody on the bus or the L or the trolley, there are still trolleys running here in Philly, that everyone is safe, not carrying COVID-19, and that you are safe with your mask or your double masks and all the protection you have. And so the challenge is, if you awakened in the morning with some joy in your heart and in your spirit from that favorite song, or your little child kissed you, or as Dr. Maitland said, you sent your child back to school and feel hopeful about that. And then you're on 76, the Schuylkill, or you're on SEPTA, and someone cuts you off, or someone gets on the bus and they decide, and thank you for my screen and my slides, and someone gets on the the bus, and they don't have a mask on, and they're arguing, and they're sick and tired of it. How likely is it that you've lost your joy? That moment that you had that felt like it was yours just a half an hour before, or 60 seconds before, through your earphones, your ear pods. And all of a sudden, that person who cut you off, who gives you the finger, and maybe you throw a few fingers back at them, but you've lost that moment that was really authentically yours of joy. And so part of what I want to talk about and want you to think about, and then we'll take your questions and your thoughts, is what is in the way of your joy? What is it that you could do that would help you cultivate joy in and through these difficult moments and times? I mean, 2020 was a brutal year, and we can go to the next slide, thank you, was a brutal year. I mean, something unimaginable in our lifetimes. And whether you yourself had COVID, because there are people, I imagine, who may be listening right now or watching right now, who they themselves or someone in your life had COVID, recovered from COVID, or died from COVID. Maybe one person, maybe many people. How you're holding all of that, the issue of unemployment and losing your job, or being furloughed and then going back to work. So all of those major things that have stirred up the lack of joy and the terror in your life is something that I want us to make soft, sacred room, just for the few moments we are together today, to take a deep breath. You can go to the next slide and think about, what is it that you need, deserve, desire, so that we can help you find and cultivate joy through and during and in this difficult time. It is your divine birthright, being human and being whole. I don't know about you, but so often we, you ask someone, how are you doing? And depending upon where they are, they might say, I'm fine, thank you. If you're in, particularly in an African-American church, you might hear the phrase, I'm blessed and highly favored. Not that it is not true if we are above ground, as they say, but it is so seldom we hear people saying, I'm blessed because somehow I survived the mess that my life is in. I'm blessed because I'm still kind of standing, kind of have some semblance of my sanity, but I'm struggling. Those Christmas letters that some people, and I'm not, hating on Christmas letters. I get them, I read them, I appreciate being caught up on what has happened in someone's life. But so seldom in those letters, summarizing the year, do I ever get a letter, a holiday letter, a Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, end of year letter, that tells me not only the triumphs, like who went to school and who graduated and who got a new job, but I don't hear about the cancer scare. I don't hear about the drug addiction that we thought we had beat as a family and we're struggling again. I don't hear about the human piece of us. And so it cheats us, because we think when we get these letters that the people who are living their lives are somehow, they found like the secret sauce, they found a way to be joyful all the time, to be happy and positive all the time. And then it can make you and me feel off, like something is weak in us or wrong or broken, when in truth, we are simply human, all of us. And so it is your divine birthright and mine to be human and whole. And let me explain a bit about whole. You see on the screen, whole, W-H-O-L-E. That's true. But what does that mean? It means that we have a lot of holes, H-O-L-E-S. Yes, you and me, H-O-L-E-S. We've got holes. Nothing to be ashamed of. It's part of being human. It's part of your birthright to have H-O-L-E-S, to have holes, to have things that have fallen apart and you're not quite sure how to put them back together. And to be whole, we are having holes, H-O-L-E-S, to become whole, W-H-O-L-E, which is a holy, H-O-L-Y experience. So you can't have a sacred and a holy experience without the H-O-L-E-S. And the next slide, please. So our time together right now is about wake up, show up, grow up, rise up. What does that mean? That's the Dr. Robin equation. It's what I used to pull myself up and out of hells that I could not have imagined would burn so hot and long. We don't even have enough time this morning for me to share with you what I have personally endured, not just in 2020, that too. My mother died unexpectedly, not from COVID. She had an extraordinary life. She lived 30 years longer than my father, and both of them had extraordinary lives. My mother lived to be 98. I was a late baby. Now people have babies in their 40s, but I was a late baby. And so she lived a full, robust life, still was in her own house, living on her own terms, and keeping me jumping for sure to make sure that all was well. So she died at home and died peacefully. And as I said, died unexpectedly. I mean, just one morning, my siblings and I happened to be there and just gone. So it was sweet and soft and gentle, and of course, created an enormous ache. But it was not the ache of people who have had to say goodbye to people through COVID or gun violence, because again, I am a native of Philly. I see what is happening here, particularly in Black and Brown communities, and particularly with Black and Brown boys, not just men, but boys. Sometimes we make young men and adolescents as if they are men because they're carrying guns. And sometimes carrying guns because they have no place to weep about their HOLES. So being whole, WHOLE, on that holy journey feels so apart from what they are connected to. So wake up, show up, grow up, rise up is an equation for empowerment and healing and transformation. It's the way in which we take what is painful, what has gone wrong, what you think is wasted, and we put it in a, basically what I say, we throw it into like a meat grinder, all the things that hurt you and me, that broke you and me, and we convert them into usable currency. So we have to wake up to them. We can't pretend and we can't deny, again, how are you? Oh, I'm great, when I'm falling apart. So it's to wake up and to begin to tell the truth, to show up and report for active duty in your life, to grow up and to rise up. To grow up, which means that some of what I used to do when I was younger. And I don't even mean physically do, I mean how my mind was geared. You know, that story I told you where you have joy and then someone gives you the finger or they cut you off or something happens and your joy just flies right out with them. And so the question becomes, who owns you when your joy can be taken so easily, when it can go? And I'm not talking about happiness. I think it's important that we are talking about joy, reclaiming joy, which is very different than I feel happy. Joy is something that we cultivate that is not based on being happy, and then to be able to rise up. And so let's look at the next screen, please. So you might think, what in the world, Dr. Robin, does Socrates and Malcolm X, what do they have in common? Well, Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So being in denial, being checked out, blaming everyone else for what's going wrong. I mean, that the unexamined life is not worth living. And then Malcolm X came along, obviously, many years later and said, and the examined life is painful. And so I want us to know that the journey we're on, can you close that door, please? Sorry, I just want to make sure we're not having, I'm hearing people talk and I want you to myself. So it's important because if we look at the ways in which we have not known, this is not to blame me or blame you, we've not known because we haven't had examples often of what it means to examine your life, to examine it, not pretend about it, but to examine it. And one of the things I talk about in terms of therapy, that what therapy is at its best is it's overhearing a conversation that you've been having with yourself all your life. So it's like you were able to be a fly on the wall in your own life. That's what therapy is, not necessarily, you know, sitting on my couch. I mean, that's a good thing when that happens and it works, but it's creating a safe space where you can overhear that lifelong ache, that lifelong space where that not good enough wound maybe abides in you. And you tell everybody, I'm good, I'm straight, I got it. But actually, there are lots of pieces to you and me that aren't feeling so good, that aren't feeling so straight, that aren't really feeling like we've got it. And that's why Malcolm X's words, that the examined life is painful. So it's a powerful moment between these two men, their message that the unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates says. And then Malcolm comes later and says, and the examined life is painful. But pain put in that meat grinder, a wake up, show up, grow up, rise up. Pain becomes purpose. Pain can become purpose instead of pain becoming more pain. And the next slide, please. You know, there's a story that I love to share about pain and purpose, about what is usable and what we would rather lose and throw into the trash can of life. There's a story in the New Testament in the Bible, and it's in the book of Acts. And there's a story about a shipwreck. And it says that, you know, there was this ship, and there was a shipwreck, and some of the people on the boat were able to swim. So they could swim to safety. And so maybe you're a good swimmer. I'm a great swimmer. I don't know about what would happen if there were a shipwreck, and it depends how far out that is. But they said some people could swim to safety. So they made it. They were okay. But this is the part I want you and me to really focus on as we're talking about cultivating and finding and harnessing our joy in difficult moments. In this difficult moment, the people who could not swim, guess what how they survived? It says they floated back on the broken pieces of the ship. I love that. I love it because it means that the things that we thought were waste, the things that you thought and I thought were the broken pieces of your life, your broken joys, your broken dreams, your broken aspirations, have just now become flotation devices to get you and me en route to your joy. So that, to me, if nothing else today, you remember, just remember that those broken pieces of your life, of your dreams, of your relationships, could be, if you choose, because it does have to be a choice, could be the very thing that ushers you back into the life that you deserve and desire and the one you want to build. So your body, your brain, your burden, your power, the amygdala hijack. What does the amygdala hijack mean? I'm not going to give you a kind of class on the brain. I'm not qualified. I don't know it that well, but I know enough to tell you this. The amygdala is this little small part in the back of the brain, in the back of the head and in the back of the brain. And all it knows is that we're either safe or we're in danger. So it can't like process data. All the things I just shared with you, the amygdala is not interested in that. The amygdala knows that it either feels, it's like animalistic. It either feels like I'm good and I'm safe, or it feels like I'm in enemy territory. So it either, if it is afraid, it fights or it flees. So it runs away or it fights. And the reason I want to just mention, as we're talking about joy in your body, your brain, your burden, is that if you're unaware that some of your responses are not really what you think 2021, they're what your old brain coded. It's like in the computer, and you wonder, like, how does the computer know what to do? Because it's been programmed, it's been hardwired to do certain things. The same is true for your brain and mine. So there are times when you may just react, and it may be an overreaction if you're willing to admit it. Have you ever overreacted? Of course you have. Have I ever overreacted? Of course I have. Even when sometimes the overreaction is inside, maybe the sweat you didn't see on the outside, but I feel it on the inside. I feel anxious. I feel scared. I feel, overwhelmed. I feel aggressive. I feel angry. What is that? And I don't know where it's come from. A lot of times it is that old brain that has coded something as either dangerous or pleasant and safe. So I want you to think about when you're interacting with people at work, at home, people who get on your last nerve. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we don't underline that word get on my last nerves, which means that I need to check it out because it's my nerve or nerves that they have gotten in or under. And so maybe I need to do a little soft, gentle soul searching about what am I stirred up about? Am I jealous because maybe you figured out how to parent and I didn't? Am I envious? Am I depressed because, COVID happened and I don't know, it looks like, your family didn't fall apart and mine did. And I don't know how to say to a safe person, help me, because I want to feel differently in my body, in my brain, and in my burdens, so I can have power. And the next slide, please. So as we're looking at this story around joy, identity theft, the lion story, Rabbi, I have a question, and okay to be you. So identity theft, I write about in my book, Hungry, the truth about being full. And the lion story says that the lion story can never be told by the hunter. And so I'm wondering, who is it that tells your story? Who is it that knows your story? Do you even know your own story? So think about that. The lion story, it can't be told by the hunter because the hunter has its own version of hunting the lion. And if it catches the lion, how the lion was killed and why. Very, very different. Very, very different. And I'm wondering for you, who's been telling your story? I want you to think about that. Are you telling your story? Is your grandmother telling your story? Is your ex-wife telling your story? Because the power of knowing what your own story is and telling it is important. And that's not an easy thing because we've got to find safe people, hear me, safe people who are worthy of hearing your story. Your story is sacred. My story is sacred. My holes, HOLES, they are sacred. So I don't plan to, cast my pearls on swine. So I have to find the right people to tell my story. So in Hungry, I write about identity theft, and not your credit card, not your Amex, not your Visa, not your debit card being stolen. I mean, that's a hassle. It's a nightmare. Given COVID, of course, the more distress we are under, the more there are thieves who are trying to take advantage of our vulnerability. So you have to protect, of course, your portfolio, your identity, your driver's license. But I'm talking about something bigger. I'm talking about your core identity, like who you be, who you are. And so I tell the story about a guy, he's a wonderful writer, a Irish poet, David White. And he tells a story about going to a meeting and asking the question in this meeting. He's ruffling through papers and looking for something. And all of a sudden he says, has anyone seen David? And everyone in the room laughs because he was the only David that worked at this agency. But he said he actually was heartsick when he asked the question because he knew that he was missing. And when I heard him tell that story about himself, it immediately spoke to me because I felt like I had been missing in action for a long time. That yes, people saw me. They saw me everywhere. But there was a part of me that was not there, that was missing. And I knew that I was missing. And it was even more painful because other people did not know that I was missing, but I knew. I knew that I had shown up, but I was not fully present. I don't know if that's happened for you where you show up and it's like automatic pilot. You know that you've passed, that certain gas station because you drive by it every day. You know that you passed that school that was closed down. You passed the apartment complex, but you don't remember the journey at all. You just remember starting and you remember arriving, but you don't remember the process because you're living on automatic pilot, not present in your body, like right now. Just take a deep breath with me right now. Just to acknowledge your breath, to acknowledge that you are here, to acknowledge that you have needs, some of which are met and some of which are not, just to acknowledge yourself. And so as I wrote about identity theft, I had to ask myself the question I'm going to ask you that has a lot to do with joy. When is the last time someone saw the real you? And when is the last time you saw the real you? Do you know who the real you is? Because we have so many people trying to make us into what they want or need us to be. I mean, parents do that, maybe not because they want to, but because they are afraid, because it was done to them. So what does it mean to bless someone to be themselves, not to be what you want them to be? And so the rabbi says, Rabbi, I have a question. So the students of the rabbi said, Rabbi, we want to ask you something. And the rabbi was ready, for their question. And they said, Rabbi, in the afterlife, what's the big question we will be asked? Like, what are we gonna be asked in the afterlife? And the rabbi, they're waiting, students are waiting. And he said, you will not be asked why you are not David, why you were not Esther, why you were not Abraham. You will be asked why you were not you. Ooh, I don't know about you, but every time I tell that story, I feel it. That my soul, God, for people who believe in God, a higher power, the universe, whatever, but that force that is bigger than you and me will have one question. Not why was I not my mother or my father, but Robin, why were you not you? So I want you to be thinking about that, because part of having joy in difficult times is wearing clothes that are yours, not clothes that belong to someone else. That okay to be you on this slide, because you're here in Philly, you can appreciate this even more. There is a place called the Attic, and it is a space, a safe space for young people, LGBTQ young people. I keep a glass in my kitchen that says okay to be you from them. I went and spoke to them. It was a packed room. I sat on the floor with, as many kids, probably more than they were allowed to have in this space. And we talked for hours about identity theft, about people who wanted them to wear clothes that they couldn't wear. They tried to wear their grandmother, grandfather, their parents' clothes, society's clothes, to be heterosexual, whatever that means, but not to be gay, lesbian, trans. They tried to wear other clothes, and those clothes didn't fit. And so the cup that they gave me, the glass they gave me, says okay to be you. And I believe that that's the blessing we are all looking for. That's what unleashes some of our joy, is someone who says to you that it's okay to be you, and nurtures that in you. And we can go to the next slide. So as we think about identity and we think about what it is that has stolen from you and from me, your joy, your smile. Paul Laurence Dunbar said, we wear the mask that grins and lies. So this goes back to what I was saying about, how are you doing? Or if you have to get off of your Zoom meeting and you say, oh, I've got to go, to the dentist. We don't usually say, oh, I've got to go. I have therapy. I have to go. My 12-step meeting is, what's up with that? What's up with that piece of us not claiming? I can claim that I can go to the dentist, but that undercurrent around taking care of ourselves mentally and emotionally and relationally. You'd say that you're going to your accountant. You would say that you are meeting with a business coach, but we don't say that we're going to talk to a therapist or, family therapy or couples therapy, or sit our butts down somewhere so we can safely overhear the conversation we've been having with ourselves. So also in Hungry, my third book, I tell this story that like the doorbell rings. This is just an example. And I think it is, my girlfriend coming to visit, of course, prior to COVID, the book was written and the story was told. And I go to the door and I realize, oh, it's not my girlfriend, it's my neighbor. And I say, oh, just a minute, I didn't bring the key. And then I have to, but it's not that I can't open the door. It's that the mask I had for the girlfriend isn't the mask I wear for the neighbor, isn't the mask I wear for my mother, isn't the mask I wear for my boss. Like, how exhausting is that? All these masks that grin and lie, and not lie because we're bad people. My first book was called Lies at the Altar, The Truth About Great Marriages. And it's not just about marriage, it's really about self-knowledge, that how in the world could we partner with anyone and have a successful, healthy, vibrant, growthful marriage if we don't know ourselves. Forget the other person. So, often we get married or partnered and then we blame the other person, and never really learn what are the falsities that we brought into the union, not only about the other person and about the institution of marriage, but about ourselves. Like, maybe you think you're generous, maybe you think you are patient, maybe you think fill in the blank. I always say to people that if you want to know something really truthful about who you really are, ask your kids, ask young people. If you haven't scared them to death, ask them. And they will tell us about our masks. They'll tell us about what's phony and what's real in us. And if we are wise and can take a deep breath and stomach the truth, we could be made so much better from that ask, if you will. So we can go to the next slide, please. Invisibility, I see you. That's really what this is about. So much of what steals our joy, steals your joy, has stolen mine, is when I felt invisible. I think what is happening in our country and in our world, but certainly here in America, has so much to do with invisibility and how painful it is to not be seen. I believe that the deepest wound that we can create, and I think, again, this is what we're seeing in our country, but it's also what we're seeing in our families. And I want you to ask yourself a question, not if I hurt my children, if I hurt my significant other, if I hurt my employee or employer, not if, but when I hurt my child, when I hurt my spouse, when I hurt my friend, when I hurt the other. Can I see it? Can I hear it? Am I willing to understand that I am both victim and perpetrator? It's a tough one. But yes, you are both victim and you are perpetrator. And unless we can see where we are not only victim, but we are also perpetrator, we're dangerous, actually, because we will continue to act in ways that we language as acceptable or good or for good reason. My mother used to say to me when I'd say, Mommy, you know, this was hurtful. Well, you know, the reason I did it, I said, okay, that may have been the reason you did it. But what I want to do is let's put a pin right now. Because what I'm saying is, I don't know why you did it, but what you did hurt me. That was tough for her. It's also tough for her, by the way. She would be kind of gasping right now, not because anything was wrong. I would be giving keynotes and speeches all over the world. And I would say, you know, maybe 20 or 30 minutes into it, my mother's probably like having a heart pain. And people are like, oh gosh, you know, I hope your mother's okay. I said, oh, no, she's fine. She just knows that I've been standing long enough to tell you something real about my relationship with her. And so why was it that that piece of her was so fragile? And my grandmother, who was the daughter of a freed slave, who was extraordinary and lived to be 108 and a half, which is why my mother was certain she was going to live to be 108 and a half as well, at least. But my grandmother, my grandfather died early. My grandmother raised, you know, her children as a widow by herself and did an extraordinary job, put herself through nursing school late in life. And I mean, just in Pittsburgh, created just an extraordinary life. And she had a tough tongue, which means that she could be really hurtful with her words. And I remember saying something to her and I said, Grandmommy, that was unkind. And she said, you shouldn't sass me. I mean, I was grown at this point. And I said, I'm not. I'm just saying what no one else will say to you is that that's painful. And so I tell you this, because my mother didn't want you to know these holes, HOLES, because she thought somehow that those holes would make us not WHOLE. But in truth, all of our ups and downs, our ins and outs, our successes and failures, our smashes and crashes are all part of being human and whole. And so when we are invisible to people, it wounds the soul and the mind and the body. So being able to say, I see you, is like going into the ICU of a hospital. It would heal so much, not like magic, because once I see you, then I'm going to respond to you in a different way, understanding that I am victim and perpetrator, and so are you. And so if I am perpetrator against you, I may not want to know that about myself, but if I see you, and then I can see myself, we now have an equation as we talk about wake up, show up, grow up, rise up, that begins to teach us how to institute different behaviors in our relationships. We can't just say we want to see people. There have to be behaviors that show that we are no longer willing to turn our backs on ourselves or on someone else. So the next screen, please. So before we go to, this is called The Price of Truth, and this is from The Matrix. You might know about this. Maybe you've seen it a long time ago, but I just want this clip to be played, and after it is played, I will share why. So you can play the clip, please.
Do you want to know what it is? The matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now in this very room, you can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? that you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
So the reason I chose that may or may not be obvious, but this is the truth. That we have all been enslaved to misinformation about who we are and who we're not. We've all been enslaved and taken things in as if they are true and never really questioned whether or not the clothes we are wearing are our clothes. And so this is a big ask from me to you. It's a big ask as we're talking about finding joy, cultivating joy in difficult times. But I am going to ask that you consider in what ways some of your thinking, some of the ways and beliefs that you have about yourself and other people, some of the things that you are attached to believing, like you want to believe them because it's all you've known. I'm going to ask that you consider that some of what you think you know may be untrue about you and about other people. There was a wonderful veterinarian who took care of my daughter dog, Callie. Callie was a rescue dog, a Portuguese water dog. And the first day I met him, Callie had been terribly abused and kicked and beat and really very severely harmed. I adopted her when she was almost 8 and she lived to be 16, like my family. So the doctor said she had the genes of my grandmother and mother. But it was interesting, when I met the veterinarian, he told me this story. He went to University of Penn vet school. And he said the first day there was some famous veterinarian that came in to lecture to them. And he said to the class, it's not what you don't know. It's what you know that ain't so. And that's what I'm inviting you to consider. It's not what you don't know that has gotten many of us in trouble. It's what you know that ain't so. So it's the stuff we think we are certain about that actually is not so. So talking about being enslaved and a whole world that is operating. Remember, I talked about the brain and the amygdala hijack and the things that we are certain of that are not so. And so how do we lean in very differently to living our lives, not having life live us? Very, very different thing. So as we go to the next slide, we know that there's been so much that's been happening. And so you see these young kids, all ethnicities and all skin tones. And yeah, it says, what happened? What happened to you, to me, to us? What happened? What happened to our innocence? And some of what happened is that some of us actually weren't grandfathered in to that innocence. You can go to the next slide. People, black and brown, red. I mean, that this land we are on was originally owned. We're renting, although we haven't been paying rent. I mean, we're renting from the universe in the biggest scheme of that narrative, but renting from the Native Americans who were here, who were swindled and forced. And, again, the narrative about what happened. Most people don't know the narrative of what happened. And so I have the journey we're on. I can't breathe. And I mean, George Floyd and, Breonna and Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben and people, the Confederate flag and people who are like so supportive, black, brown, red, yellow, white. So this journey we're on, we have to make room. I mean, it makes sense to me that white people in particular would say, I don't get it about Aunt Jemima. Like, do we really have to change the photograph? Like, where's the harm? And unless we have curiosity with people who have a different experience than you and me, it's really tough to create communication where we understand that we are victim and we are perpetrator. And so much of this has to do with creating safety to build connection. There's a story I want to quickly tell you because a lot of people don't know the history of this, that Fannie Lou Hamer, she was, people know her as an activist, which is true. A lot of people do not know that she suffered something called the Mississippi appendectomy. And you might say, well, what is that? That is when Black young women of childbearing age, young, like in their 20s, were given hysterectomies, but it was called an appendectomy. So all of these Black women became sterilized. So people know about the Tuskegee study. They don't know about these appendectomies that were not appendectomies, they were hysterectomies. And so the journey is around curiosity. How could we harm people if we saw them as people? Remember this whole thing about I see you. And so what we are capable of doing and how we are capable of robbing joy if we do not see someone fully for who they are is where we become dangerous and other people become endangered. And the next slide, please. So discomfort, disruption, and unrest. You see lots of signs, a rainbow of faces, colors. I just want to remind us as we are on this journey for joy, to reclaim your joy in the midst of the virus and unemployment and racial and gender and so many other kinds of unrest. I want to remind you that discomfort, disruption, and unrest, they're not your enemy. A lot of times when I am uncomfortable, when there is disruption, when there is unrest in me, it's my soul saying, Robin, wake up, show up, grow up, rise up. And so I want you to teach your brain to know that every time you're sitting at the table with your family and you feel anxious and you're like, I need to get out of here, maybe. But I always tell people, don't leave without the lesson. You know, when couples are struggling, I say, okay, if you slam the door, okay, we've all done that, many of us, but don't leave without the lesson. So don't have the discomfort, the disruption, and the unrest. And so if America could wake up, show up, grow up, rise up, if they could understand that actually we have been given this extraordinary opportunity through our discomfort, through our disruption, and through our unrest to move into relationship with ourselves and each other in a way that would be empowered and impactful like never before. The next slide, please. So fearless, what's it mean? My company is called Fearless One, W-O-N, but fearless. I mean, I don't like when I hear people just say, oh, be fearless, live fearless. I mean, I think, you know, fearless is great, except for we're all terrified right now about the virus, about the vaccine. You know, if you get it, hopefully it's going to be okay. Hopefully the side effects, hopefully what it means. If you send your kids back to school, hopefully, prayerfully, I mean, a lot of fear. If you stay at the job because a lot of people don't have work, but it doesn't feel like the right match. If you leave the job because a lot of people don't have, I mean, a lot of fear is what I'm saying. Around health, around wealth or the lack of it, around unemployment, around having dreams, around where you live. You know, when I say to people, go outside and take a walk, are you kidding me? It depends where you live, whether or not you can go outside. I'm a Philly girl, so I understand what it means. I grew up in West Oak Lane, which was a changing neighborhood at the time. And my grandmother, who was blind, my father's mother was at 57th and Thompson. Again, but that's a long, long time ago. You know, when the corner stores were places and they're butchers and all these other things. And now people are afraid, no matter where they live, about coming outside and crimes that are happening even in daylight. And we don't have time to talk about systemic reasons why those crimes are happening, because if we were taking care of and we were seeing and we were being with people, restoring their dignity to work, to make a living, to participate in life, some of the crime we are seeing, crime, tears, guns, tears that aren't cried. So fearless just means this, that with all the fear I have today and that you have today, that maybe it's less fear than I had yesterday. And tomorrow I will have less fear to live my life out loud than I have today. That's all it is. So just fearing less for fearless. The next slide, please. So there is a poem, and I'm closing now because I want to take your questions or hear your comments. And I had to debate whether or not I was going to share Love After Love with you because I wasn't sure. I had to think, you know, does it fit? And I thought, of course it fits, because we're talking about reclaiming joy and restoring joy. Your birthright is to have your joy. Sometimes we are looking, you are looking, and I am looking for joy outside of myself. I'm looking for love outside of myself. So Love After Love is a poem by Derek Walcott. And it's really talking about the love affair. And I would say the joy that you can have when you greet yourself. You know, you're happy, like when you get home and your dog jumps up and down and is so excited to see you. Or maybe your kid runs, you know, Dr. Maitland said that, you know, I think her daughter, she sent back to school. So what is it like to open your arms, particularly if you're not homeschooling, and have your child run in your arms. It's fantastic. But what about the moments where we need to be running into our own arms? So this is the poem, Love After Love. The time will come when with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who loves you by heart, who knows you by heart, who knows you better than anyone. Take down the photographs, take down the desperate notes, and peel your image from the mirror. Remember, you will love again. This is the gift of this poem, that you will love again the stranger who was yourself, that all those moments that stole your joy, all those moments that sat on your soul, all those things that happened in 2020 and before 2020, and that happened just in these couple of months in 2021, that what I'm inviting you to do is to love again the stranger who knows you by heart, who's been waiting for you to arrive all of your life. And the last slide, please. It's just a reminder. Don't waste your time. Time is the one metric we can't get back. And don't beat up yourself, by the way, if you've wasted things. Because remember what I said earlier, I don't really believe that anything is ever waste. I can feel like I wasted something, but what I do is I put it in that meat grinder and it gets churned around, and then it becomes my flotation device. It becomes information to teach me how to live my life with less fear today than I had yesterday. So don't waste your time. Don't waste your life. Don't waste this moment. So I'm now going, you can go to the next slide, but I'm going to be taking your questions and finding your joy through in and during difficult times, for you to stretch and be free like those people. Free does not mean without burden. It just means with the burden, you stretch anyhow. With the ache, you stretch anyhow. With the heartbreak, you stretch anyhow. Next week, I'm going to be doing a session with hundreds of widows whose husbands have died from COVID, many of them very young with young children. And so what I'm sharing with you, it's not, they are burdened in a way that most of us are not. And yet they have the birthright to be human and whole. They have the birthright for joy in and through and during difficult times. And so I invite you, if you have questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear from your heart in this moment. Thank you. And I'm not sure how we're going to do that, or is it going to come people showing up, or?
Hi, Dr. Robin. Quinn here. We actually have a raised hand in the participants attendees window.
Okay.
I have Amelia Price here.
Okay.
Amelia, I am unmuting you.
Good morning, Dr. Smith. I actually was holding back the tears. My mom used to say that her birthday is actually coming up March 18th, and she's deceased, but I could hear my mother speaking through you when she used to say, words have life. You actually breathed on my spirit today. So I just want to say thank you for this phenomenal PowerPoint presentation that you did, because as a corridor manager, I've seen death, from the innocent to the ones who are like the gang violence and everything. And I feel like, the city wasn't listening to me. Mm-hmm. And just for you to, you elevated my spirit. I feel hopeful. And I had to do a self-evaluation because yes, I would as you said, we wear the mask that grins and lies. That's what I've been doing. And what really spoke to me is when you said, the lion story cannot be told by the hunter. That is powerful. That is powerful. So I just want to say thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your courage. That is feeding me. So I will carry you in my heart and keep honoring keep seeing yourself. I say to people sometimes that when we want to be taken seriously, and I've had that feeling like they're not taking me seriously. And what I've had to learn is sometimes I've had to say, Robin, you're not taking yourself seriously. So you take yourself seriously, and then you train people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. And that's, finding both gentleness in how we approach people, as well as a soberness about what you know. So thank you again. And I carry your words. I'm humbled by them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next raised hand is from Eric.
Okay. Is Eric there?
Yeah, he's taking a minute to unmute.
That's
Go ahead,
okay.
Eric.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, thanks for this wonderful presentation. I think I have an organization largely made up of younger adults, about 45. It's a seasonal business that can go up to 120. And I think the balance is making sure I don't get exhausted as the lead, where you're trying to give so much to others to pour into them, but also I think all of what you said about self-care and focus on your core values and your identity and knowing where it comes from. I just didn't know if organizations with younger people who struggle with a lot of these issues of misinformation and identity and miscommunication, what might you suggest being in the position of a leader of such an organization?
I love your question. I mean, the robust question. So I have a couple of thoughts. One is to start with where you started, which is your own self-care. It's so important. And it's interesting. Sometimes I will spend much more time, which I didn't today. So thank you for bringing up self-care. I talk very specifically, and again, spend time on how important it is to feed and take care of the vessel that we are. And in the work that, I imagine many of the people who have joined us today are in, it's depleting work. It might be purpose-filled work. It might be purposeful work. It might be work that is passion-driven and mission aligned, and it's also exhausting. And so it is so important, Eric, and to everyone who is hearing and listening, that you practice self-care. And so to ask yourself first, what do I need for me? And that can feel so selfish, like, but I've got 45 people and, during seasonal, it's 100 and some. And for me, those of us who, had an older mother and she needed, but the truth of the matter is, and it's so cliche, but it is so true. When you're flying on an airplane, they say, in the event of an emergency, first, if you're traveling with a child or someone who is more vulnerable, what do? You put your own mask on first. No, well, it's like, I got to get the mask on my child. I've got to get the mask on my mother. It's like, I've got to get the mask on me, because I'm no good to my mother or my child or to you. I mean, to this moment, had I not put my own mask on, and my team can tell you that. I mean, there are times where they're asking me to do more, And I'll say to them, not now, not now, because I know that I'm preparing, for instance, to come and be with you. And I know what that requires if I'm not going to be like The Walking Dead, where I show up and I'm here, but I'm actually not here. So number one is to ask yourself, Eric, what do you need to be doing in your self-care? What kind of time do you need? Where's your own playtime off the clock? Who do you play with? Are those places where your joy is fed, or are you talking or spending time with people who deplete you? I mean, some of us have friends, we all have friends, some of whom are more fun to be with. And I will ask people when they tell me they're going to go hang out with someone, and I know that that's a person who drains them. Hey, what's up with that? Like, how come you're picking that person? Well, I haven't seen them for a while, and you know, they had a hardship and I don't want them to feel abandoned. And I say, okay, I hear that, but you're abandoning yourself right now. And so we have to figure out how to not do this guilt trip and choose other people over ourselves, where they end up with a smile and we end up exhausted. As it relates to your workforce, who come from a lot of different, places and have many different messages that they're bringing to the table, what I would suggest is, preaching to people. Although I'm an ordained minister, I don't believe, and I do, preach in pulpits when you're allowed to do that. But my way of being in the therapy room or the pulpit or the corporate, executive room is to create a bridge. And bridges have to be developed through trust and respect. And so I would say, if you could show, not talk about it, but show curiosity with your workforce to learn about them, and then to ask that as you are learning about them, might they have some interest in being curious about your perspective, about your world, about what you've seen and what you've learned. And it's a very different way than standing somewhere and telling people what they need to know. It's a very different way. And so I believe that accountability that the partnership between being accountable and compassionate is where you have the most powerful exchanges. That compassion without accountability can be impotent. It kind of is sweet, but it doesn't go anywhere. Accountability without the compassion can feel brutal and is too tough. So I think if you can be sweet and balance it with this curiosity in them and invite them to have a curiosity in a world that is different than the world that they're living in. Because that is how, look, I'm working with people who vote for everyone. They're Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents, they're people that didn't vote at all. And I have legitimately created relationships with people who see the world very, very differently than I see it. And a lot of that isn't because I'm such a fantastic trainer. It's because I am genuinely interested in the world of someone that is different than my own. And people feel that. They know that it's not a game and it's not a gimmick. And so those are my thoughts for you, Eric. But take care of yourself first and then implement some of these other practices. And I think we have another question, maybe? Do we have a question?
We do. There's a question in the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Robin or Samantha, either one of you can read that out loud.
Okay.
So it's from Jacqueline Sims. How do you work through everyone seeing you as the strong person who handles business for everyone, but no one offers to help you? Maybe the mask I wear gives the impression I don't need help, but sometimes I feel like I'm surrounded by emotional vampires.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that question. And thank you for reading it. I love the question because I feel like that's been a piece of my own personal story. What I can say, I can't say about you, but I can certainly say it about me. And I do know that people who are good at tasks, they can get things done. They can check all the lists for themselves and other people. Often we give off the impression that we're doing it without cost, without sweating. And you might say, well, people see what needs to be done. I mean, clearly I could use help, but that's different than you're asking for it. So I think it is important that and I love that you're asking about like maybe the mask you're wearing. Sure, it is a mask and you don't blame yourself for this. You're just, again, wake up, show up, grow up, rise up. How exciting. You're recognizing that quite possibly your mask has communicated. Maybe it's the mask that you were assigned as a child. Maybe it's the mask you were assigned. And it also started to kind of feel good because being the one who can navigate at some point can feel good. But what felt good at some point begins to bury you, or it certainly did with me. So it's learning how to ask for help, creating an identity that part of your birthright is to understand that you have needs and that you don't want to carry everything alone. And that even if people saw you that way, again, in my family, that is kind of how things played out. I was the caretaker for my mother, although she was super independent, but super independent as she got older, still required tons from me. And my siblings were trusting that I had it. And I wasn't asking for what I need. Like, this is too heavy and I'm drowning. And I had been in 2 car accidents and a lot of stuff happened, to me. And I just kept, as they, the new phrase is powering through, right past myself, right past my health, right past my wholeness and my holes that I was so aware of. So I would say with gentleness and with tenderness and with honesty, to take that mask off and, take your hand in your own face, your face in your own hands, and look at yourself in the mirror, kind of as I am doing now with you, and hold your face. Yeah. And recognize how hard it's been and how heavy it's been. And that you're ready now. You feel entitled even, and that you realize that strong people ask for help. Strong people ask for help. Entitled people ask for help. Wise people ask for help. So that's what you will begin to do with the right people, the people who will partner with you and recognize that you are wake up, show up, grow up. This is your growing up. And now it is your rising up to ask for what you want and need. So thank you for that. It's a powerful question. I want to just, and I know we're at time and there may be another question or two, but just quickly tell this story. There's a story in the Old Testament again, and often I'm telling stories from different places, but today seems to be somewhere in the Bible. And of David, who was at that time not king, and Saul, who was the king. And David was going, even if you don't know this story, you may have heard of Goliath. He was a giant, and David was going to go fight the giant Goliath. And the king, Saul, said to David, like, because he was the king and he had had lots of wars and he won these wars with his armor. He offered David his armor and he said, look, basically, I'll hook you up. You can wear what worked for me. And so David puts it on, and guess what happened? It didn't fit. And so how do you tell the king, like, thanks, but no thanks? How do you tell your boss, like, thank you for, giving me your presentation. I'll take the part that works, but it's not working for me. And so this question you asked, but I think all of what we're talking about in terms of joy has to do with finding the clothes that were tailor-made for us. And so we can be grateful for what our parents did or did not do. We can be thankful for our best friend who said, you know, this is how I saved my marriage. You know, I never talked about anything. And you could think, okay, I'm glad your marriage got saved that way. That's kind of like not going to work for mine. So we don't have to throw anyone under the bus. You know, David didn't have to throw the king under the bus, but he was scared to like say, I got to find what works for me. So I'm inviting you today to not only find your joy, but find out what works for you. I mean, taking a walk if you can. And if you're not in a safe neighborhood, then you know, Philadelphia has the parks. We've got Fairmount Park. And so you find a place in the park, or you go walking with a friend, not your sister. You know, if your sister like drains you, you know, I said that I think that God created caller ID so that we can look at who's on the phone and put, you know, decline and get back to them later, because you've got to, like I was saying to Eric, take care of you, your temple, your vessel, so that you can fill yourself with joy in these difficult, through these difficult, during these difficult times. Replenish and renew yourself in the clothes that fit for you. And then you can go out and be aligned with your mission, your vision, your passion, and your work.
If you're like me, I'm just blown away. And I was just in the chat with Samantha saying we could go on. Michelle, I see you. Michelle's my good friend. I don't want to cry. But this was amazing. This was amazing. And Dr. Robin, thank you. Let me just say that Samantha, and I know Allie's on the line, Allie Ferguson from Scattergood. I don't think Joe Pyle, the president, is on. I know Sam Rose is on. Sam is my manager. We had this discussion back in the fall, and we said we're missing something. Ann Nevins, our president, she was on the call today. She just had to jump off. But we recognized that this pandemic, this civil unrest, was having an impact that was not being addressed. And we wanted to talk to entrepreneurs about not just saving their business, but saving their minds, saving their souls, because they were going through so much. And we worked together to come up with the titles for each part. And we came up with the 6 parts, the titles. We are so indebted to Spectrum Health Services for helping us identifying such capable medical professionals who helped us throughout this 6 months. But I gotta tell you, I don't think anybody thought we could end like we ended today. So look, I'm gonna come off video.
But let me just say this to you, Ms. Marla Hamilton, for your leadership and also your tears. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I give keynotes and in front of thousands of people, and I will cry if tears come up, and I don't apologize for tears because they are my teacher. They are the watering of my soul, particularly when there's been a drought. And so that's another mismessage. We want to dismantle right now that tears don't belong in the workplace, that they don't belong in corporate America, that they don't belong in not-for-profits. And I mean, why not? Like, why would our tears, see, that's that compartmentalizing, that's that, you know, like wholeness, my holes. I mean, and I feel it is a beautiful moment for you to share and to be a leader who is giving the example that tears do not make us weak. I think, you know, with men, all men, white men, black men, boys, you know, girls fall down and we pick them up and kiss their boo-boo. Boys fall down, we tell them to get up, you'll be okay. And then we wonder why men of all races and ethnicities have less access to their tears because we stole them. And so I feel that we right now, as a group of, you know, human beings who are in business of some sort, but right now in the business of trying to be alive in the midst of a pandemic and racial wounding, and that we've gathered as a woke tribe to care about each other and about ourselves, or about ourselves first and each other. So I just want to thank you for allowing us to see the example of strength and vulnerability together. Because I think if we don't see the image of it, we don't know that it is literally okay. Which is why I don't hold tears in when they come. It may make other people uncomfortable, like, oh, what's happening with Dr. Robin? And I'll tell them, don't, I'm fine. I'm feeling right now. I'm fine. I'm feeling right now. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this series, but for allowing me to co-create this moment with you. Thank you.
So, Dr. Robin, thank you so much. It's been an incredible series. It's been an incredible day. And finding joy during difficult times has been such an awesome way to wrap up. And you know, and the proof of it for me is we said this is going to be an hour, and except for the few people who had 10 o'clock appointments, it is 10:34 and people are still here. Yeah. And so you have touched on something that has been invisible, right? Mm-hmm. It's been invisible, and we've been invisible, and each of us has been trying to manage our way as entrepreneurs, as employees, as parents, as spouses, as friends. We've all been doing this. So thank you so. Kimberly said she came back, right? She went off and came back. You know, clearly we've touched on something. And I think Dr. Samantha, we talked about this. Allie is on here. We talked about this. Sam is on here. We talked about this in the fall. There is something missing as we are going through this time. And so thank you so much, Dr. Robin. Thank you, Reggie, on your team for helping us through this. Quinn and Jasmine had to jump off. For everyone who has attended these sessions over the last 6 months, we hear you, and we are not finished. We are not finished. We thought we were touching something back then, and I think you've confirmed it for us. And so in a way that is beyond anything we could have expected. And so I do want to say, for Dr. Smith, for Dr. Robin, she talked about her parents. But for those of you who know or don't know, her father went to school right here, LaSalle. So her family has a legacy here. He was Dr. Warren E. Smith. And for those of you who don't know, when you see healthcare centers around Philadelphia, the Warren E. Smith Health Centers, that's her dad. They are now, they've condensed their name to WES, W-E-S, but that is Dr. Warren E. Smith. And so Dr. Smith, Dr. Robin Smith, has come from a legacy of people who have educated themselves around issues and helping and healing. So we are very, very fortunate in Philadelphia to have had her father, her mother as legacies, and now she's carrying on. And so we are, on behalf of PIDC and Ann Nevins and Sam Rhodes and all of our executive team here, we thank you to the Scattergood Foundation, to Spectrum Health Services, a great client, for taking the time to help us send a message to entrepreneurs who are human first, human first, and business people somewhere down the line, but human first. So we thank you. We thank everyone for your time. Please stay tuned to all of the activities that are coming up with PIDC. You will be able to access the replay of today's session, but stay close to us, because we see an opportunity to be able to expand this subject that is so very, very needed. And I tend to think, Dr. Robin, these things were bubbling just beneath the surface. Yes. And it is just the circumstances that cause them to break through. And so there are some things that we really do need to talk about, victim and perpetrator.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To learn about me, and then for me to hear about you. So thank you so much. I do have to ask Sam, if Sam is still on, Sam Rhodes, who is our executive vice president. Sam is still on. So Sam, if you would just close us out, I'm done. But if Sam, if you would just close us out. Sam, are you unmuting yourself? There he is.
There you go. Sorry about that. I don't know how I can close this out. Marla, you, Dr. Smith, you started it, and Marla, you closed it out. I don't know how. Obviously, PIDC's business is about small business and supporting the small business, and I don't know how we can do that without supporting the whole person. And Dr. Smith, I think you really hit it on the spot in a way that connected with our clients, who are on this with me, with Marla. And I just hope that we have these moments, and so often they're fleeting. And I hope that we can hold it. Yeah. I've just been so touched over the last couple of days. And this is, we're all Philadelphians. I'm a Philadelphian as well, Dr. Smith. And I came to this job because it's hard to grow up in Philadelphia and not think that there aren't some things that we can improve upon. And, one of those things that's particularly touched me, and I'm sure it's weighing on all of us, is, over the weekend, and then in the news article that was today in the Inquirer, they highlighted, I think finally, to my way of thinking, they finally highlighted with a map all of the shootings that are happening just in one neighborhood, just in West Philadelphia. Well, several neighborhoods, but in the West Philadelphia area. And it's terrible, it's devastating, it's beyond terrible. But we have to shine light on it. We can't not know these things. We can't not put them out. But at any rate, I apologize for bringing that's just something that's been weighing on me in particular. So I thank you for that. I think this is so important for our community. Like I said, I hope that we can carry it forward and find time in each of our individual lives to reflect, to think, to recharge, and we've come so far. I mean, to have muscled through, in many cases, I think it's literally muscling through the COVID response and the civil unrest, which to my mind only highlighted what has been going on in this country for so long, that all of us know and all of us knew, black and white. And I said this at the time, and Marla and I have had many discussions. I'm actually thankful for it because I think it highlighted again, like that article brought things to light in a way that we can talk about them and hopefully move forward. So I shouldn't drone on. This is not about me. So I can't really close this out. I thank you, Dr. Smith. Marla, I thank you, as I said in the chat, for visioning this, for recognizing the need, for visioning the series, for pulling it off. It's remarkable. And I think that we ought to continue thinking about ways to carry this forward. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Well, and with that, as I close out most of these webinars, my pastor says, if all hearts and minds are clear, thank you, and we will see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.